Hey guys, thanks for watching. This is another video from myself, Gabe, and I have put together this video series called Real Estate Chat. And part of it is that I'm doing videos on the topics that are semi-taboo in real estate that people don't want to talk about. And I think it's very important that this information is out there because I think that realtors tend to hold back on the struggles of being a realtor. And so I think a lot of the consumer doesn't understand what it looks like. And I think that with everything that's happened recently, I think we need to expose what it's like to actually be a realtor, like the raw and the real. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and please like and subscribe.
Major changes coming soon to the real estate market. Realtor commissions, they are likely to drop to a fraction of what they are now.
So mortgage rates rose last week for the first time in 3 weeks, and as a result, demand came down.
The headline here is the National Association of Realtors, which represents 1.5 million real estate agents nationwide.
The National Association of Realtors has now agreed to rewrite a number of the rules that regulate America's housing industry.
All right, so one of the things that I know is difficult is a lot of agents don't want to talk about the finances in real estate. And I think, and I don't even know why, if I'm being honest with you, because I think that the reality is that a lot of people think we make more money than we actually do. And I'm not saying realtors don't get paid well, but I think that it is very, very underplayed as to how much effort goes into getting and making what we make. And I think if you ask any realtor if they work hard, they're going to tell you, you bet your ass I work my ass off, right? Like that's just the reality of what it is. I don't know anybody, I don't know any realtors, specifically successful ones, that'll sit there and say, oh yeah, it just came to me. It was easy. I'm not saying there aren't situations where somebody inherited a business from their parents or somebody was an affluent family in town, and so they just automatically had a decent amount of business. But even still, it takes a lot of work. So I always tell my partners or people that I mentor, like that in life you have two assets, and you either have time or you have money, and you're going to spend one or the other. There's no way around it. If you're going to spend the money, you're going to save the time. If you're going to spend the time, you're going to save the money. And that's really what it comes down to. And I think that it's honestly, a lot of people don't realize that. And I think that applies to life in general, right? If you think about as simple as going out to eat dinner, right? If you go eat dinner out at a restaurant, you're going to spend the money, but you don't have to spend the time cooking. If you eat at home, you're going to save the money, but you're going to spend the time cooking. So inevitably, you're always trading your time for money and your money for time. That's just what it is. That's life. That's where we live. And so I think that it's, again, I don't know why it's so taboo in real estate to talk about money, but I think it's really important that we do, because I do think that with all the lawsuits and everything that's happening and just all the changes we've had in the industry, it's infuriating that people think we just make all these buku bucks and what the hell are we make? What are we doing for it? And I think it's wrong, right? Because I don't think that it's fair to assume that because technology has advanced, realtors don't do their job. That's bullcrap, right? Okay, you can find the property on Zillow. I actually just watched the video earlier today where that's exactly what the person was saying. They were saying, well, back in my day, son, we used to sit down with the realtor and they brought out this encyclopedia Yellow Pages book where they would show us property, and that was the MLS. Today, I can go on Zillow. Good for you. Good for frickin' you. Go on Zillow and look it up. That is fine. However, do you know how to write a contract? Do you know how to negotiate a contract? Do you know what you can and can't say? Do you know how to hire the right home inspector? Do you know how to go about the process so you don't get screwed over because the seller does have representation? Think about it that way. Think about if you said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to court. And when I go to court, I'm going to go without an attorney, but I'm going to go against an attorney. Good freaking luck. I mean, that's just the reality. And I get it. The argument is, okay, well, let the buyer pay for their own commission. And I do agree. I think that to some degree, I think that there is a level of truth to that where it's like, hey, let the buyer pay their own agent commission because that's who's representing them. I'm not going to throw the baby with the bathwater and say that it's all bad in that sense, because I do agree. I do think that to some level the buyer should. However, let's break it down, and I broke this down in my previous video, and then once I get into this, I'm going to get into the money and what it costs and how much we make as realtors and yada yada. And I don't have any statistics in front of me. I'm just going based off of what my team and people around me, realtors around me, are doing. So that's kind of a bit biased just because it is my particular market and my particular circle. But nonetheless, I mean, we can look at the numbers and look at it overall. But the way the agreement works with the seller is the seller's not paying 3% to a buyer's agent and 3% to a listing agent. That's crap. That's not how that works. The way the contract works is the seller's paying 6% to the listing agent. The listing agent is deciding to split that commission with another realtor if that realtor brings them a buyer that closes on the property. So what that means is you're looking at it from a perspective of, oh, I'm paying for somebody to go against me. I'm looking at it from a perspective where it's like, hey, if I wasn't incentivizing him, he sends his buyer somewhere else. And that buyer might not be looking on Zillow. I don't know what that buyer's looking at. I don't know how much time that buyer has. I don't know what. So at the end of the day, you're incentivizing a buyer's agent to bring you a buyer. That's all you're doing. And at the end of the day, you're still paying the same freaking amount. I said this in the other video, right? If you have 3% that you're paying now because of this lawsuit, and I say, hey, you know what? Yes, Mr. Seller, 3% is fine, but I'm going to give 1.5 to a buyer's agent. That's my freaking problem. I'm taking out of my pay. And so if I come to you and I say, hey, I'm going to charge you 5%, 6%, 8%, whatever, to list your home, and then I say, hey, by the way, I'm going to split my commission with a buyer's agent, so be it. I have a good friend of mine, and I've done this myself, that does 4.5%. And what he does, he keeps 2 and he offers 2.5. He takes a pay cut. Why? Because in his mind, well, it saves the seller some money compared to what I guess other people would be doing. Again, just as a disclaimer, as realtors, we are not allowed to discuss a commission in a standardized way. So there is no standard commission rate. That does not exist because it is actually a big no-no in our industry. But that being said, he does 4.5%. And so he offers 2.5 and keeps 2. And the reason he does that is because he sees it as, hey, with 2%, I'm taking the pay cut, but I'm offering my clients still the full service, and it's a business based on quantity, right? That's how he runs it. Not that he doesn't provide quality, but it's based on quantity. It just is. And so, that being said, it's absurd to me that people think the way they do. So either way, now that I've gotten that rant out of the way, let's get into the nitty gritty because I don't want to go too long into the video, but I want to talk about the finances in real estate. And one of the things I want to talk about in real estate when it comes to money is a lot of people think we make a crap ton of money. And yes, realtors make money. But like I said, earlier on, you're going to spend either your time or your money on whatever it is you're doing, right? So in real estate, I gave an example in my previous video of a $300,000 house. The average house in my area, I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The average house in my area is about 350 grand is I think what our average is right now. So based on 300,000, because it's an easier number, assuming the 6%, 3 and 3, which is what I normally do. Again, I've done different numbers. I've done 4.5, I've done 5, I've done 6, I've done 8. It just really depends. Every situation is different, and I just kind of base it off of that. So that being said, if I'm doing 3, we said it was 9 grand, right? So if I do 9 grand, and in that video we talked about how out of that 9, I'm probably going to keep 6, right? So if I'm keeping 6 out of that 9, that's just counting overhead. That does not include my expenses for actually for your property, for how I got for marketing expenses, et cetera, et cetera. So By the time it's all said and done, by the time you factor in all the marketing costs and everything that most realtors are spending money on, I gave a number of like 4,500, and I think that's about accurate. I think 50% is accurate. Now, if you look at the 4,500 and you look at how much time is being spent, right? You realize that the hourly rate of the average realtor is actually sub $20 an hour. That's just what it is. If you look at the numbers, that's what it is. And we can break those numbers down. Let's break it down by kind of the statistic of where we are, right? So on average, the average realtor sells about 10 properties a year. Okay, those are the active, what we call active realtors, people that are actually working in the business. So 10 properties at 4,500 is 45 grand. I think it might be closer. I think it's like $25 an hour or something like that. But here's the crazy part. That 48,000, that's not net, that's gross, right? Now you still have to pay taxes. I'm sorry, 45. You still have to pay taxes on that 45,000. So when people sit there and say, "Oh, realtors make so much money, it's ridiculous." Some do, most don't. But even the ones that do, let's backpedal, right? And let's look at it. I have a friend of mine, buddy of mine, makes we're not going to give a number. We're just going to say between $750,000 to $1 million a year in commissions. That's how much he makes. And I get it. This is a unique, extreme scenario. This man wakes up in the morning. He's in the office by 8. He starts making calls at 8 o'clock in the morning. He then goes door knocking, door to door for a few hours. Then he goes back to the office, makes more calls. And then in the evening, he goes on listing appointments for the people that want to sell their homes. His average day is easily a 12 to 14 hour workday. And he's doing this usually Monday through Saturday. So while, yes, he's making more money than $25 an hour, he's also working his ass off. So, this whole concept of realtors make too much money and that's not true. Realtors do make money, and they can make very good money. I'm going to give you an example. My second year in real estate, I think I did in commissions, and I give this example because this was right as I was starting my team, so my numbers weren't skewed. It was literally my production. And so I want to say I did about $80,000, $90,000 in commissions. That's how much I made. I spent easily about $30,000 to, it was like low 30s, I want to say, in a website, in staff, right? So I had a virtual assistant. I had to have somebody that helped me with my contracts. I had to pay all my brokerage fees and my license fees and my MLS fees and all those other fees. And so it's frustrating because a lot of people think we make all this money. And there's something I say about realtors because this is just the unfortunate truth. We are taxed on everything we purchase. And what I mean by tax, I don't mean government tax. I mean like taxed as in we are overcharged for everything we use. An example, a CRM, which is a contact management, essentially, software, right? And a CRM for any business, for any of my businesses, runs me about $50 to $100 a month, depending on how many features I want. In real estate, the average CRM, I want to say, is around $200 to $500 a month. So do that math. Do the math of how much we are like essentially overcharged for the same freaking softwares almost. Like they have the same features. It's just more relevant to real estate and it just makes it easy as a realtor to do it. But it's just way more expensive. And then you look at advertising. Our advertising is way more expensive. People are like, "Oh, well, whatever." It's because we are regulated, right? We have the equal opportunity housing. We have I mean, the list goes on and on and on of how much crap and how many rules we have to abide by as realtors. And I understand of it. Some of it's for great reason. I get it. But I'm going to give you an example. In my print shop, I can sell to whoever I want. If there's a demographic, if there's a class of people that my print shop does the most amount of business with, I can directly target them. As a realtor, I cannot do that. Because what happens is it is taken as discrimination in real estate. But it doesn't in print. It doesn't in my cleaning company. It doesn't in my construction company, but it does in real estate. And so it's super unfortunate because people don't realize this. So we, as realtors, we spend twice as much in advertising to get the results because we can't narrow things down. There's false expectations too, where, for example, if you don't drive a nice car and you're a realtor, at least a decent car and you're a realtor, nobody's going to look at you. If I showed up in a 1995 Toyota Corolla to show a house, that client will probably not want to work with me. It's ridiculous, but it is what it is. And I'm not saying that all consumers are shallow like that, but I think a lot of them are. I think a lot of them see success in a certain way. And so if you don't have a certain vehicle or a certain stature or a certain status, you essentially don't earn their business. And I think that's so wrong. I think that's so unfair and so discouraging, right? Because what if you're just a humble person? What if you are the Dave Ramsey of real estate, right? Where you go in and you say, I want to have everything paid off in cash and I don't want to have any debt. And so I'm not going to buy a brand new car. And I'm not going to buy a fancy car. And I'm going to buy a 95 Toyota Corolla because it was, a great find. It's under 100,000 miles. And I know this car is going to run forever. I don't care that it's 2024, right? The problem is that, unfortunately, you can't think that way because somebody's just going to assume, oh, you can't afford a nicer car. And again, I'm not speaking for everyone. This is not a totality statement, but it is a very common thing to see in our industry. It's frustrating because people assume that realtors make a crap ton of money. And the reality is that while realtors do make money, they also dish out a lot of money. And it costs a lot to be a realtor, and it costs a lot to be an active realtor. And I think that that's what's most frustrating to me is that people don't want to see that. And they don't want to see the work that's put into that. And I also, like I said, when you evaluate what it's like to be a realtor day to day, the amount of hours, the amount of stress, I had somebody calling me on Saturday night, this past Saturday, I had somebody calling me at 10 o'clock at night. I didn't answer because I'm in a place in my business where I don't have to answer. I value my sleep. I value my kids. I value my wife. I value my family way too much to interrupt my evening for a real estate phone call. I'm just not going to do it. It can wait till tomorrow. The house isn't burning. There's no contract that expires at midnight. So guess what? It ain't happening. It's waiting till, actually in this case, it waits till Monday because I don't do Sundays either. So that being said, and I told the person that. I legitimately told the person that. They called me on Saturday at 10 p.m. and I didn't answer. They sent me a text. And the next day on Sunday, they called me and I didn't respond either. And on Monday morning, I sent them a text and I said, hey, I saw I missed a couple calls from you. I don't work past 7 p.m. any day of the week and I don't work Sundays. And when we got on the phone, the gentleman was super nice and he said, oh, so you don't work weekends? I said, no, I work weekends. I just don't work past 7 any day of the week. And I don't work on Sundays because I have 4 kids and I have a wife and that comes first. And so he's like, oh, okay, I have 5. I completely understand. You'll never get those years back. And that's great. But I stood my ground. I'm sorry. I'm not here to be at your beck and call. I'm not going to do it. I will be there for you. And again, here's the thing. If I have an expiration on a contract or something and it, midnight is the expiration or whatever, sure, I'll be on the phone till 11:59 if I have to. But that's a unique scenario. I'm not going to pick up the phone on a Saturday night at 10 p.m. just because you're calling me about a property I have on the market. That's just not going to happen. To me, that's an unrealistic expectation. But I think we deal with that every day. And I think so many realtors don't know how to stand their ground and say, oh, this is what I want. And the truth is, again, I think it's the misconception that people have of what real estate is. And I think that we'll get more into these things, but there's a huge issue, I guess you can call it, with how people just assume that we just make a crap ton of money and we just go and buy all these nice things with it. Yeah, we do have nice things, but you know what? Nine out of 10 realtors that you're going to meet don't make more than the CEO or even general manager of some of the places you frequent. I promise you that. I promise you that. I promise you that the place you go get gas, I can promise you that the owners of that gas station make way more money than your realtor. I promise that the grocery store you go buy your groceries at, that general manager probably makes more than a realtor, than most realtors. And again, I just think that and I'm talking about net, right? I'm talking about after all the expenses and after all the crap is out the door. The problem is people see a check at the closing table for, $18,000, 9 for the buyer, 9 for the seller, and they look at it and say, that's way too much money. Why am I paying that? And I think that if it comes down to it, I think it comes down to greed. I think a lot of the consumer is greedy. But at the end of the day, nobody's sitting here, and this is, I guess, what frustrates me. Nobody's sitting here questioning why title companies charge fees on top of, whatever their job is, right? Like, nobody's sitting here questioning why mortgage lenders get paid the percentages they get paid to put together the mortgage. Nobody, because it's a lesser amount, so people automatically assume they're not assume, people just automatically ignore it because it's a lesser amount. And it's like, until it hurts your wallet, you don't really care. That's messed up because I work my ass off for it. I have agents that work with me that are new in the business, and and by the time it's all said and done, and I haven't even something I haven't even spoken on either, because I'm fortunate and I'm part of a brokerage where we're what's called 100% commission. So we have fees we have a transaction fee that we have to pay our brokerage, but we pretty much keep our check. The entire, so if my check was $9,000 through my brokerage, I pretty much keep the $9,000. There's some fees and stuff I have to pay, so it's less. But again, my brokerage is what's called 100% commission. And I think that, if you're a realtor and you're watching this, I'm part of United, and I think they're a great company. They're actually global, and they're amazing. But that being said, I've been part of other 100% commission brokerages out there as well, and I think more and more are popping up. But for the majority of realtors out there, they're splitting with their brokerage. So as a realtor, some brokerages will charge you 30%. So that means that a $9,000 check, as the realtor, you're starting with $7,200, not $9,000, because your brokerage took the $1,800 30%. Right? Well, actually, no. I'm sorry. That's 20%. Right? So if you think about it, and there are 20% brokerages, there are 30% brokerages. It just depends on where you're part of. But the point is, they're taking that. Not to mention, like I said, you have all the other expenses of being part of a brokerage. You have monthly fees, desk fees, technology dues. There's all kinds. And again, not every brokerage charges everything, but brokerages in general are going to charge you certain fees every single month. So the next time you think that a realtor is banking and making all this crazy money, check yourself. Check yourself, because you're assuming something. You're assuming that they're making all this cash. You're assuming that they're taking home a $9,000 check, when the reality is they're not. The reality is that if you're making, even my buddy that is making, like I said, between $750,000 and $1 million. He's under $1 million, but between $750,000 and $1 million. Even his take home is about 50% of that, at best. At best, because after he pays taxes, which he gets taxed hardcore because of his income bracket, after paying his taxes and then paying all his other stuff, I mean, he's getting hit. So just be careful, because ignorance is something that can really hurt. And I don't stand for ignorance. That's the whole reason I started this entire series of videos, is because I want to abolish, or I want to discredit the BS that's out there about real estate, because I think it's time we do that. I think as realtors, we've kind of slow stepped and walked around because we're willing to take the criticism, because people just assume that, oh, well, I guess maybe, yeah, I got my statement from the brokerage and I did make 100 and whatever thousand. Well, you didn't make that. That's not your net, right? Let's compare it to a net income from a W-2, and let's see where you stand compared to other professionals. And I promise you, you might be making okay money, but you're not raking it in like people think you are. And so I think it's time that as realtors, one, we stand up and we really just take our place and say, you know what, the reality is that this is where we are, and this is who we are, and this is how we are going to, this is how we're going to step forward. Because again, I'm of the belief that, I'm sorry, if you want to list your property with me and you don't want me to pay a buyer's commission, I'm probably going to turn you away. And the reason for that is because if I have, right now, I personally right now have 2 listings on the market. If I had to personally go out and hunt buyers for both of those properties, I would not have time to run the rest of my business. I would not have time to manage my team. I would not have time to find more listings, and I would not have time to work with buyers. I just would not. It's impossible. So I think co-op, which is the cooperative commission agreement or whatever they want to call it, I think it's crucial, because I think, again, if it was just searching property, I'd sit there and I'd say, you have a point. You could find it on Zillow. Sure. But let's look at it from a perspective of, why are FSBOs one of the most sought after cold calls that realtors make? Right? Why is it that for sale by owners fail so much? And that's a topic for a different day, because I think that has to do with, and I kind of have this video idea, kind of rolling around in my head, where we're going to talk about anything you can do, I can do better is kind of what I'm thinking about titling it. But the reality is that in the same way that FSBOs have such a huge failure rate, in the same way, buyers using or sellers using buyer's agents are what succeed. If you do a for sale by owner, most for sale by owners offer a commission to a buyer's agent, by the way. But if you don't, there's no incentive. Why am I going to do this? Because now you say, well, let your client pay for it. Okay, great. If my client doesn't have the money, my client's between paying me or buying the house. And I can't morally and ethically tell my client, hey, I know you love this house, but you can't afford me and they're not paying me. So I'm sorry. Too bad, so sad. You can't do it.